and also on all the carbon market events.
Our best guest. So I will get started now and then hand over to Herman and then hand over to you.
Yeah,
As you
sure.
feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I can.
As she likes. As you prefer. What are you more comfortable? Yeah, I think so. Same level. You are flexible. Good afternoon. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to today's Article 6.4 Strategic Market Dialogue that connects host countries, buyer governments, project developers, and the financial community to leverage cooperation for investable mitigation projects that power the NDCs and simultaneously benefit both people and planet. It is our heartfelt privilege and pleasure having you here today, as you are the ones who make all the difference in your respective and important contexts. My name is Nadine Nimal, and I lead the Article 6 Capacity Building Unit at UNFCCC and have the heartfelt joy to be your moderator today. And I'm also really, really excited to see so many of you again who have already attended the previous 4 Article 6 events. So you reap all the benefits of the frequent users, such as taking informed, strategic, and foresighted decisions in the bustling carbon markets ecosystem and environment. With the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism, the PACAM, open for business, you choose a very timely event that drives early engagement and connects supply and demand for impactful partnerships to unlock the potent 6.4 avenue for financing mitigation activities that are aligned with national priorities, while at the same time ensuring transparency, accountability, and environmental credibility. In this decisive phase of carbon markets, where demand for high-quality Paris-aligned mitigation outcomes is increasing across all actors, we got you excellent speakers and panelists today, starting with Mr. Perumal Arumugam. I don't think after those 4 events I need to introduce him again, but I will for the protocol. He's the manager of the Markets and Non-Market Support and Stakeholder Interaction Subdivision at UNFCCC. And as we have learned in the evening inception workshop, also Mr. Article 6 by name. He will give you a brief outline on how the PACAM represents a responsive evolution in how carbon markets can drive impactful climate action. After that, he will directly hand over to our distinguished UNFCCC Deputy Executive Secretary, Ms. Noura Hamladji. We are so happy to have you with us. It's our privilege. As we said, you are our most important ambassador. And we are excited to have your keynote that will illustrate how PACAM, as the cornerstone of integrity, can leverage people-centered and lasting climate action that matters on the ground. After that, we have a short group picture. Please come back, because something exciting is to come. The interactive segment with 2 consecutive, truly distinguished and engaging panels. And now, as we have a big plan, over to you, Perumal.
Yeah, it's basically like, hello everyone, first of all, and I think when I'm coming here, you know what I'm going to speak about, which is obviously the PACAM and its high value Like I will not get into the detail because we have been starting already 15 minutes late, but I think this is one of the ideas that is originated like from our DES before. We wanted to bring this together in Belém, Hugo, which we couldn't do because of the negotiation, the heat within the negotiation. We couldn't organize this. This is basically a platform to bring people with different implementation knowledge, like in terms of people who are buyers, traders, host parties, project developers, etc., and to have this platform. It's absolutely clear that there's more than 250 billion plus reduction in NDC implementation cost through international cooperation under Article 6. If there is any problem with that, Bjorn will be the one who will be responding to you. This comes from the study that they have done as AITA along with the University of Maryland. And we also have 168 parties that are signaling to intent the use in Article 6. With the new ICTU guidance and NDC 3.0, it's getting quite clear, of course, still not into the detail that we need to understand how each countries are planning to use. But it is already very clear that 160 plus countries are signaling to use one way or the other the Article 6 for their cooperation. The integrity, I think you may have the integrity FOMO or integrity coma when you go out of there. I think we have been hearing to this quite frequently, and it's the cornerstone. As we say that, I repeatedly say the carbon markets are a double-edged sword. If they are implemented in a right way, they contribute to the Paris goals and reduce emissions. If they are implemented in a wrong way, it increases emissions, and Article 6 guidance addresses them. Clear integrity is also not just a peripheral issue without a common integrity framework. The PACM provides that high integrity infrastructure. I think we have heard enough in the last 2 days about the central role that the PACM offers. With PACM, the high integrity is no longer a constraint, but it's a competitive advantage. The infrastructure related to Engage is available. The question is who engages first, and I've been quite promising and encouraging when I was speaking to many country stakeholders here, and the interest in the countries that are coming forward in engaging with PACM is very, very encouraging. This is the broader scope that we wanted to cover. With that, I would invite our Deputy Executive Secretary, Ms. Noura Hamalji, to provide a few remarks. Thanks, Noura.
Okay. So good afternoon to all. I will be brief. Just a few remarks and thoughts I wanted to share with you. So it is a pleasure, first of all, to join you today for this important dialogue to advance cooperation on international carbon markets. For years, the focus under Article 6 has rightly been on building the rules, on negotiation, and building the institution and the foundations. Today, with PACM fully operational, our priority shifts to implementation. So it is about turning this framework into finance, into bankable projects, and real mitigation on the ground. The PACM, in our view, can help finance the transformation needed to address the climate crisis at the speed and at the scale that we would like to see, backed by strong environmental safeguards and also rigorous rules. Importantly, the PACM reflects lessons learned, what works and what needs to be strengthened. It is designed to deliver real, measurable, and credible mitigation outcomes grounded in environmental integrity. In practice, this means robust methodologies, independent oversight, and credible systems that enable countries to generate and trade carbon credits, reducing emissions. It reduces administrative burdens, it supports alignment with national climate priorities, and it helps channel predictable finance including for adaptation. These are the foundation of a market that buyers, government, and investor can trust. So the notion of trust is absolutely central for this market. So PACAM is open for business. Methodologies are in place, with more in development and coming. Rules and standards have been established. We have an interim registry, which is live, while the full registry is being built and the first credit have been issued now. This progress comes at a time when governments, compliant markets, and the private sector are increasingly seeking high integrity credits. But demand alone is not enough. We must turn it into real finance on the ground by building pipelines of investment-ready projects, channeling support where it is needed most, advancing national climate plans, and accelerating global climate action. Platforms like today's strategic market dialogue are critical. They create space for early engagement, they help align expectations, and they connect supply with demand. I think that's the core ambition here, connecting supply with demand. So I would like to thank all colleagues and partners participating in this session, and I wish you a productive and successful exchange. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nora, as always, for having set the tone for an action-oriented dialogue today. As I announced, my dear colleague Uma from the Regional Collaboration Center will now orchestrate the group picture, and then we ask you to come back so that we can continue smoothly. Uma, over to you.
Okay, look at the right. Okay, big smile. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, same pose. It's down. Yeah. Okay, good. 1, 2, 3. Okay, last. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
So thank you so much. That was briefer than we thought. The DS unfortunately had to leave as we started 15 minutes late. But we will catch up on time because now we will have a very condensed overview of the emerging supply and demand landscape provided by my treasured colleague, So-Young Lim, Program Officer at UNFCCC. Please.
Thank you, Nadine, for your kind introduction. And I'd like to briefly set the context for our today's dialogue by providing overview of the emerging market landscape. I'll also keep very brief to help facilitate an open dialogue among you. To begin with, if you look at the carbon markets from a market perspective, they are fundamentally shaped by demand and supply. On the demand side, this is largely driven by compliance markets, including NDC, CORSIA, and carbon pricing instruments, mostly implemented domestically. At the same time, voluntary carbon market or voluntary commitments by the private sector are also becoming an increasingly important source of demand. On the supply side, this relates to generation of carbon credits or units. Key sources include the Paris Agreement credit mechanism, or PACM, under Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement, bilateral cooperation under Article 6.2, as well as government-led crediting mechanism. We also have some kind of this, like this new type of the crediting mechanism driven, owned by the government, and also we have the independent crediting programs. Let me start with the demand side. Turning first to demand from NDC implementation and achievement. In this context, compliance-driven demand is closely linked to Article 6, which enables parties to cooperate in achieving higher ambition by trading internationally international transfer mitigation outcomes, or ITMOs, among themselves. According to the NDC synthesis report released by the Secretariat in October last year, parties are fortunately bending their combined emission curve further downward, but a major acceleration is still needed. In this regard, as an enabler of implementation, the number of parties participating in or planning to participate in Article 6 continues to grow. Building on this, based on latest NDC submitted by each party, over 75% of parties have explicitly indicated their intention to participate in Article 6. If we exclude those that have clearly stated they will not use it, nearly all parties, around 90% of parties, have left the possibility open. However, among these, only around 10% are expected to be on the buyer side, while the vast majority are likely to be sellers. As a result, demand for ITMOs for 2030 targets remains limited. But we are expecting that for 2035 NDC, we may have more demand for ITMO to achieve the NDC target of each party. So let me now highlight some key demand signals identified from NDCs. For example, one of the front runner of the Article 6 implementation, Switzerland plans to use ITMOs toward its 2030 and 2035 targets and has already signed multiple bilateral agreements. Japan has set quantitative targets for emission reductions and removals, indicating potential demand at scale through their joint credit mechanism, or JCM. The Republic of Korea is also considering the use of ITMOs as a complementary measure with the announced plans to use ITMOs for its 2030 target. Domestically, they announced that the $37.5 million ton of ITMOs will be used to achieve their 2030 targets. Similarly, Singapore is exploring the use of ITMOs as well, particularly to address the residual emissions. A notable example is the European Union for the new demand signal. The EU has recently amended its climate law to allow the limited use of high-integrity international carbon credits under Article 6, up to 5% from 2036 onwards, in support of achieving its 2040 target. This can be seen as a positive signal on demand side. Moving on to CORSIA, according to the periodic review released by ICAO last year, cumulative offsetting requirements, referred to as eligible emissions unit, or EEU, between 2024 and 2035 are estimated to range from around 950 to 1,500 million tons, or 1.5 gigatons. Turning to domestic carbon pricing, credits for compliance with these schemes could represent a substantial source of demand by 2030, while the scale, as you can see, varies across jurisdictions. The overall trend suggests growing potential demand for credits. Finally, turning to the voluntary carbon market. Based on external forecasts, demand could grow significantly and potentially become one of the largest sources of demand over time. Turning now to the supply side. Sources that generate tradable carbon credits or units include the Paris Agreement credit mechanism and 6.2 bilateral or plurilateral cooperation, as well as government-led and independent crediting programs. I think I can hear some noise from virtual participants. With the adoption of Article 6, these credits are now distinguished as authorized and non-authorized. This kind of new paradigm shifted the whole shape of the carbon markets. Authorized units from any of these sources can be used for both compliance and voluntary purposes, correct? And including, the NDCs and for CORSIA compliance, while non-authorized units cannot be used for such a compliance for NDC and CORSIA compliance purposes. As expected, authorized units tend to command a price premium, as the host or first transferring parties are required to apply corresponding adjustment when it was authorized, and the first transfer when can entail additional administrative costs and the political consideration or political risk of the overselling. While demand exists at scale, it remains largely latent. Unlocking this will require 4 key enabling conditions: supply integrity, host country readiness, price discovery, and pipeline visibility. Together, this can help translate the latent demand into real scalable market transactions. In this context, the imminent start of PACM transactions is particularly encouraging sign for the market. Key milestones show that the mechanism is moving from rulebook to implementation, with the first issuance already completed and trading expected to begin in 2026 this year. With the CDM transition already underway, a pipeline of supply is also being prepared. In short, the PACM is an open board business. To conclude, while we are seeing growing signal on both the demand and supply sides, important question remained around how to translate this into a real investment and transactions. With that in mind, let me leave you with the 3 questions to guide today's discussion. First, what demand side signals give buyers enough certainty to commit capital now? Second, what bottlenecks are still constraining the supply of high integrity credits, whether in governance, methodology, capacity, or finance? And third, how can Article 6.4 infrastructure help reduce risks for buyers, host country, and investors? With that, I'll stop there, and I hope this sets the stage for a constructive discussion today. And back to you, Nadine.
Thank you so much, So-Young, for the very interesting run through the shifting carbon markets ecosystem and the factors needed for turning demand into investment. Indeed, carbon markets reach an inflection point with compliance timelines tightening, national ETS exploring linkages, and MDB scaling results-based instruments. Against this backdrop, it is my great pleasure to hand over to Mr. Uma Krishnan. He is our Article 6 and carbon pricing expert from the Regional Collaboration Center MENA in South Asia, and will be moderating the first panel, which connects perspectives from host countries and market stakeholders to explore how credible project pipelines are being developed and how emerging demand is shaping the cooperation under Article 6, translating readiness into implementation. Uma, over to you for introducing the panelists.
Thank you, Nadine. Once again, good afternoon, colleagues. Thanks for setting this stage in terms of the panel discussion which we'll be having. Maybe I'll request our first panelist, Mr. Langa Dorji from the Royal Government of Bhutan, then Christina from Chile, Ayan Hazare from Somalia, colleagues from Sweden, and then beyond from the IETA. Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you. Just take 2 minutes to settle down. Okay, thank you. So as what Nadine was mentioning specific to this panel, we will be more discussing about how the supply demand is working in among the buyer side as well as on the sell side. And we have an interesting panel members here from the government, from the market, from the buyer community, which is the country who will be authorized. Thanks, Soyang, for that. So without much of further ado, as we all know that we are already running late, my first question would be to Langa from the Royal Government of Bhutan. So from the government perspective, what are the key institutional and policy enablers which are being developed towards developing a credible pipeline? Because recently you guys have come up with the carbon market investment information platform, which it provides the information about the projects which are coming up from the country. Considering how Bhutan is looking into developing this pipeline, being a carbon neutral country, and then balancing the domestic NDC commitments. Over to you, Langa.
Thank you very much, Uma. Thank you. And then very good afternoon to all the distinguished guest audience and then my panelists here. First of all, Bhutan would like to express our sincere appreciation to the UNF Secretariat and the government of Korea for hosting this and inviting us to this platform. And we are very delighted to participate in this forum. And we look forward to learning from one another. And from the experience of Bhutan, from our, firstly, just to give an experience from the engagement with our V20 project, we had identified around 88 projects for the as a pipeline, and then we have given around 36 projects, pipeline projects in our web portal, and then we also learned that from there it's resource intensive, as well as we need a lot of technical expertise people, as well as the institutional readiness while coming up with all these pipeline projects. And I think the capacity building for Article 6 and then the framework that we have come up with 2025, Bhutan has come up with the carbon market framework 2025, and where we also try to institutionalize our arrangements through this carbon market framework. We have also developed the positive list where we give 9 broad categories for the project developer for the participation in the carbon market. And then not only that, beyond that, we have also taken some of the detailed assessment of trying to find out some of the potential mitigation activities on the carbon market, and as well as the opportunities related to that. And then one thing, another thing is that we also have institutionalized this carbon Bhutan Climate Fund, where it plays a critical role as a project developer, aggregator, as well as they conducting the due diligence in the field of carbon market. Another thing that I look forward is that with the recent, we have also learned yesterday that the supervisory body they are in the work in progress, and then we are looking forward that with the expedient development of methodologies and then as well as the standards expected to unlock this potential development under these mechanisms in terms of significantly supporting the countries and building the robust, the pipeline projects, especially from the upcoming new methodologies and standards. And then Bhutan, we are committed with the carbon neutral, and then we are negative, carbon negative. We are negative by almost 9.7 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And then the country has institutionalized and then mandated Department of Environment and Climate Change as a DNA under the ministries, and then they also oversee, coordinate, and as well as the project screening and authorization processes and everything. So the clear process has been given in this framework so that the participant project developer or the interested they will have a very clear picture of the do's and don'ts in line with the requirements of the country, including the authorization process of ITMOS, ensuring that the projects are aligned with the NDCs and then delivery of the sustainable development benefits and consisting with our national priorities. And also the framework that we have established has also give some clarity on the corresponding adjustment. We have also come up with a different, the bands of giving the corresponding adjustments, and then it's also given clearly in our framework so that the project developer understand from the beginning how much the country is going to start with. And then finally, and I would like to inform that the Bhutan has come up with a climate carbon market platform. So it's available, and then all of you can visit there. It's online and live, and all the information related to what the Bhutan is doing on, where we have reached, and what are the upcoming events. All these informations are being reflected in our Bhutan carbon market platforms. So I recommend to all of you to see through this. So I think I will keep there. Thank you.
Thank you, Langa, for covering up in a comprehensive way. So that gives a perfect segue in terms of being a carbon neutral country, how you are conceiving Article 6 and then moving towards implementing the projects which is very much in line with your domestic priorities. Now, maybe I'll now move towards Chile, because we know that Chile is in the forefront of coming up with carbon pricing and market instruments. So my question to Christina is that how all these instruments are kind of domestic aligned with your domestic carbon market developments, and then how it is aligned with the Article 6.4 pipeline of projects. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to share the Chile's experience here. So first, I would like to provide some background about Chile's experience and the reasons behind our decisions. Chile has participating in the carbon markets and of course international cooperation for over 20 years with the JCM, with Japan, and with the CDM. And in total, for example, we had more than 200 projects under the CDM and all over the years. And drawing in our experience, we focus on stretching private sector climate action through economic instruments, and of course, some of them are the carbon pricing and carbon market instruments. And to do this, we have, for example, already a green tax with an offsetting system. And also we are working on a hybrid ETS system that is called emission standard and offsetting system. And also, of course, stretching our, we said, voluntary certification system is a system or a program who encourage the carbon neutrality in our private sector. And in line with that, as a complement, we have all Article 6 instruments, 6.2, 6.4, and 6.8. So for us, the UNFCCC carbon mechanism means like we have the experience of the CDM, so 6.4 for us is high integrity. In that case, for domestic markets, what we have is CDM and now PACAM are recognized for like approving projects or kind of homologation of the credits in all our national instruments, because we recognize some standards like gold standard, BERA, but also PACAM is there. And also one important point, Perumal has mentioned many times during these days that Article 6.2 could be more complex than 6.4, and I completely agree. When Chile signed the two agreements with Switzerland and we already have the JCM, so we updated Japan. We realized that behind the implementation, there are a lot of definitions and human resources that we need to really comply with a high integrity carbon market or a national certification program. And in this case, due to our experience and our law and transparency, Chile decides to create a national guidelines in line with the UNFCCC decisions. It's in line with the PACAM. So for example, for our additionality, we took the tool of additionality for methodologies baseline. Everything is, if you see it, is replicated in our national context. And also, of course, seeing the best practice worldwide, in some cases, CORSIA, etc. So in line with that, we see first the use of PACAM as a reference, as a high integrity in methodologies, even for our national markets. Second, in creating a national program. I believe PACAM is a good reference on integrity for creating a national program, and also it's not inventing the wheel, no? We have something to look, we have something to use as a reference to take it as national level. And in one thing that it is important, the PACAM is also an opportunity to develop in case you don't have like national framework or you don't have like all the governance behind to give a LOA or a letter of authorization for the INMOS. So in that case, we see PACAM as an opportunity for domestic and for our international instruments.
Thank you, Christina. Interesting points in terms of having the national policy aligning with the PACAM and then including on the additionality related aspects in the national context. So we heard from two of the countries who are predominantly working towards establishing the Article 6, both from Chile as well as from Bhutan, from Asia and Latin America. Now we will turn our shift towards Africa. So the colleague from Somalia, maybe Ayan, maybe you could help us because Somalia is one of the countries which is in the early stage of operationalizing Article 6. But we also learned that there are a lot of capacity building activities which are already happening in the country. Recently, the government has also taken initiatives in providing information about the Article 6 towards the private sector, and you have already come up with a policy. So based on all the activities which are already happening in the country towards establishing and operationalizing Article 6, so what are the key steps which you have taken in the country which could benefit our colleagues from the other countries who are just starting the Article 6? So over to you, Ayan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Uma, and thank you for inviting us in this very important panel discussion. Great to connect with all the DNA representatives from all countries. So it's very interesting to hear from Bhutan and Chile, and now I'm really happy to share some experiences, not only in Somalia, but in Africa, and I'm sure many countries in the East African can relate to. What we say is that Africa has the potential and the resources to the fight against climate change and to the Paris Agreement discussions that we are always on the stage on the emission reduction. So for Somalia, it's one of the first countries that have submitted NDCs last year, June. Globally, I can say Somalia was very early, have submitted NDC very early, which just shows how committed we are in the emission reduction and the fight against climate change. Against that background, we have put a lot of effort in accessing to the international carbon markets. We started from the establishment of the DNA again last year, which consists of quite a number of institutions like Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Energy, quite a number of very good steering committee that are part of the DNA. After that, we have opened a public discussion on how do Somalia participate in the Article 6 and international carbon markets. How can we learn? How can we build our capacity? And this whole climate discussion is very new to Africa and to Somalia, let alone this very technical carbon market subject or, Article 6. It was very, very technical subject for us. But then nevertheless, the commitment was always there once we opened public discussion, which consists of the private sector, the civil society, UN, all organizations. We have generated a lot of knowledge and a lot of stakeholders who have knowledge about this subject. And then we started capacity building trainings, calling all the sectors for them to learn about this subject. From there, we also managed to start our first national guidelines on the voluntary carbon markets. We thought of that's the first entry for our country because we have experienced so many brokers and companies coming, not engaging with the ministry and doing projects outside the ministry. So integrity and transparency was a big issue for Somalia. That's why we started with developing this guideline, which is at the moment ongoing. From there, we also hope to develop the national carbon markets policy framework and regulatory systems, and at the same time registry systems. So what I can say now is that we are very committed and we have the opportunity. Somalia has a very big, massive land that can be used for deforestation, reforestation, very long coastline as well for mangroves. We are also rich in energy and renewable energy. So what we are calling is that we have the assets and we have the resources, and we are open for investors to come to Somalia and start projects on carbon markets. And we are working on the policies and regulations from the end of the government. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ayan. Very interesting observations. You mentioned about the integrity and the transparency, which is the key in terms of developing your carbon market policy. And you already identified some of the possible potentials in terms of blue carbon or renewable energy, which will have good opportunity in terms of developing in the country. So now we heard from 3 of the countries from 3 different continents, specifically representing what are the potential, everything. So before we go into the buy side, we have this Mentimeter. So in case if you have any questions, since we are already running out of time, we would request you to put up those questions. After this, we have one more panel. We'll have one Q&A session so that we can try to save some time. So with this now, I'll go shift to my next panelist, Ms. Anna from the Article 6.4 DNA from Sweden. So my question to you is that considering you are from the DNA, what are the key criteria which you are considering in terms of approving projects, and what are the safeguards you apply towards meeting up with the high environmental integrity standards under the Article 6? Over to you.
Thank you, Uma. And it's a great pleasure to be invited to take part of this panel. And thank you, South Korea, for hosting this Climate Week. The Swedish Energy Agency, as I work for, acts as Sweden's buyer of carbon credits under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and has been an early mover in international carbon markets. We also represent the Swedish DNA for Article 6 authorization and are responsible for authorization procedures and implementation aspects. I will focus on Sweden's role as a buyer country, requirements related to particularly emphasize on authorization integrity and practicality. For clarity, the DNA function is institutionally separated from the teams responsible for international climate cooperation, including bilateral agreements and working with multilateral partners such as the GGI, ADB, and the World Bank. We have deliberately separated the authorization and buying functions because it ensures high integrity, transparency, and equal treatment of all authorization requests. It is also central to maintain high standard for Swedish ITMOs and building trust in the market. Sweden is currently buying mitigation outcomes under Article 6.2 through both bilateral agreements and multilateral funds. As an EU member state, Sweden can currently only acquire credits for other international mitigation purposes, OIMPs, since we are chairing a common NDC with the EU. Sweden currently has 8 bilateral cooperation agreements, including with Ghana, with Zambia, Nepal, and Switzerland. All projects must meet high climate ambition and demonstrate additionality, environmental integrity, and capacity building impacts. Additionality is fundamental to Sweden. We assess it through multiple layers: regulatory, financial, and technological. Projects must go beyond existing policies and common practice in the host country. We prioritize projects with scale potential and long-term mitigation impact, predominantly in the energy sector. Looking ahead, we expect demand for Article 6 credits to increase, particularly as previously mentioned, EU has recently amended its climate law to allow the limited use of high-quality international credits under Article 6. And to prepare for this, Sweden has designed its national framework for Article 6 with future compliance grade demand in mind. We have, for example, incorporated elements inspired by the Article 6.4 mechanism, including a requirement for sustainability reporting aligned with the 6.4 SD tool. This reflects our view that PACM represents a strong framework for ensuring high environmental and social integrity. Article 6 cooperation is very sensitive and trust dependent. Predictability is important, and early clarity on requirements, corresponding adjustment, and sustainability expectations reduces risks for investors later. This is why early dialogue, like this market dialogue today, is critical. It allows expectations to align before projects reach a critical stage. So maintaining high environmental integrity is essential, not only to deliver real global emission reductions, but also to ensure fairness, credibility, and long-term confidence of international carbon markets. Thank you.
I like this word, long-term confidence. So that's one of the important things which we all aspire to have in the carbon market in terms of a long-term aspirations. So before I move to beyond, if I have to synthesize from all the 4 country interventions like trust, additionality, integrity, and transparency. So these are the main factors which we need in the market. So with that as a preamble, what would be your thoughts beyond specifically to answer the point of how you see the key integrity features and the governance elements are covered in the market? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Uma, and a pleasure to be here. So for those of you who are unaware, AITA, we represent around 300 of the world's largest buyers, developers, and traders of carbon credits in the private sector. And as most of you will be aware, probably in the last 10 years, more or less all demand of carbon credits has been from corporates for voluntary net zero targets. And that is also what has shaped the market in the last decade or so. So I think we have already discussed a lot of the basic integrity features that buyers are looking for. High standards around additionality, leakage, permanence, social and environmental safeguards, governance, and MRV that are inherent features, not just in PACM, but also in almost all independent crediting programs, whether that's Verra, Gold Standard, Puro, or you name it. And that has also been outlined by the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, or ICVCM, which has established 10 core carbon principles, CCPs, and have now labeled more than 9 independent carbon crediting programs with 40 methodologies as CCP eligible. But we are also seeing in the private sector a lot of additional quality requirements being proposed by coalitions of buyers. such as the LEAF Coalition, which includes over 30 international corporations with over $1 billion in commitments to procure high integrity jurisdictional REDD+ credits. We have another coalition, the Symbiosis Coalition, which is an advanced market commitment with companies such as Google, Meta, and McKinsey to procure around 20 million tons of nature-based removal credits only, with additional integrity requirements. We have Frontier, which is an advanced market commitment looking to procure only durable or permanent carbon removal credits, for example, from direct air capture or enhanced rock weathering. And these coalitions are now popping up in different parts of the world with more stringent quality and integrity criteria. But buyers are also looking increasingly on specialized carbon rating agencies, which is a relatively new phenomenon in the voluntary carbon market, where raters are looking at not just the methodology level quality, but project level implementation risks, which we have seen historically is one of the key concerns of the market. Even going back to the CDM days, I think despite what has been discussed, that PACM is, of course, now the official UN crediting mechanism, and therefore will have a stronger reputational certainty. The CDM was also the UN official crediting mechanism, and I think all of us in the room here are very well aware of the risks around and accusations of greenwashing that was linked to corporates using CDM credits and also countries using CDM credits. So as much as we, and I think everyone here in the room, hopes that PACM will deliver certainty to the market and high quality credits, I can tell you that there will be issues. We will have projects that face issues even under PACM, and it's our job here to ensure that issues with individual projects do not detriment the entire market. Just as if Samsung, to take a Korean brand, sells one faulty phone, it doesn't mean that the smartphone market, the global smartphone market, is broken. But ultimately, most of this comes back to strong government oversight, and I think that's why it's so good to have governments here in the room and a regulation to provide certainty both on the demand and the supply side. So on the supply side, we need what our colleagues from Chile, Somalia, and Bhutan have outlined: clear frameworks and procedures for authorization, for recording, for tracking. We need to have certainty that authorizations that are being provided to credits and projects are honored, so there is no risk of revocation of LOAs. We need to ensure that when countries promise that corresponding adjustments will be made, that they are actually made in the reporting and the tracking of credits. And also for introducing clear fees and sharing of benefits, which I was discussing with one of the colleagues just the other day. What fees do you want as a country? And how do you want to share the benefits of selling ITMOs or credits to the government with the private sector? But also from the demand side, countries like Sweden, Singapore, and South Korea have already outlined clearly their demand. But we know that there are many other countries around the world that will require ITMOs to meet their 2030 and 2035 NDCs that have not yet outlined their intention to buy. And we call on those countries to come out clearly and in time so that we can actually provide the investment signal for project developers to develop high quality supply to meet that. And finally, to support voluntary corporate demand, we need clarity on the claims and the use of credits that corporates are allowed to make. Today, most corporates do not want to use carbon credits because they are scared of being accused of greenwashing. So therefore, governments, and there's now the Coalition to Grow Carbon Markets with Singapore, UK, and Kenya, that are looking to provide certain regulation around what claims and what credits can corporates use to meet their voluntary net zero targets. And that will help grow this market, that will help scale all the projects that we are working on to deliver higher climate action with quality and integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, Bjorn. That's a very interesting view. Maybe before I conclude this for this panel, because we have one more panel which we will be having the information about the strategies. So I would like to turn back again to my fellow panelists. Just a quick summary of or the expectation, like let's say in the next 3 to 5 years, how do you see in terms of the carbon markets are going to be evolved from the market perspective, from the buying perspective, as also a supplier perspective, in terms of having the demand towards high integrity carbon markets? So maybe I'll just go this time from this way.
Thank you, Uma. It's a very interesting question, and seeing as Sweden is a part of the EU, we really can see that as EU now is opening up the common EU NDC for Article 6 credits, there will be a high decrease in demand for high credits, Article 6 credits. So I think both PACAM and 6.2, but especially I think PACAM will be most used, I think, seeing that it facilitates so much from the host countries' perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, I would love to say that demand will increase rapidly and we can all come back here in 5 years saying we made it. We made the $250 billion that Per-Oma was highlighting before and that we modeled already in 2019 possible. But to be frank, we are very far away from that still. And unfortunately, the current geopolitical situation is not very supportive, as most of us are aware. But many of us people here in this room actually have some degree of power to change this trajectory and provide the trust needed to scale the market beyond the total maybe 1 or 2 billion tons in cumulative transactions that we now expect until 2030, mainly by Corsia, but also with some of the sovereign demand and buyers. And I think this really comes back to what I highlighted previously, so I will not repeat it, but clear supply side frameworks from host countries and clear demand side regulation, both for sovereign demand for NDCs and for corporates wishing to use credits for their corporate net zero targets. Thank you.
Okay. 3 for 5 years more. First, I would like to highlight like when all the rules are clear and the market moves faster. I can see that we have Chile, for example, it took like 2-3 years in silence developing the framework and all the pillars to finally make all the market work out. And the framework was published, our national framework was published in December. Then a couple of resolutions went through in the first month, and then we went from 1 authorization to 5 authorizations in 1 month and a half. I received many requests from private sector weekly. So what I think is, while the market moves to define more clear procedures, frameworks, maybe in countries, but also the UN market, like the UNFCCC market, the PACAM, for example, more methodologies. We will see if the market moves faster or not. I think they are waiting to us to take decisions. And for example, I would say if the investment needs to be done now. They are waiting for our definition. So I will expect the same goal for all the standards internationally to become really in line with high integrity, and also for PACAM to have more possibility for all the typologies. For example, I already have more than 30 requests of authorizations or the previous consideration for more than 15 typologies, and I only can apply one in the PACAM. So that will be really helpful, and is what I expect in 5 years more.
Yes, thank you so much. So for Somalia, in 5 years, we have moved very fast within 1 year. So I believe in 5 years, we will be a very central country for, partnerships and been very active country in the international carbon markets and Article 6. But what we are looking for is that trusted partners, as my friend from Sweden said, the Article 6 is a very sensitive subject and needs a lot of trust. At the moment, those who are approaching us are very dodgy. It's like something we cannot really understand. And I believe many investors or partners may not take the risk to invest in Somalia. At the moment, we have engaged bilaterally with a number of countries who buy credits, but because of the lack of regulations, of systems, of policies, and risk in terms of, civil war or security-wise, they were not ready for us. But in 5 years, even in 2 years, I expect Somalia will have a very trusted buyers through Article 6.2 or again 6.4. And I'm saying in this call here, all these people who are practitioners in this subject, we are very open to partner with you. We are very open to, discuss with you how we can both work together in this emission reduction, under Article 6. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From Bhutan's perspective, with the current progress that we are making in the field of Article 6 and the carbon market, and then the readiness that we are going through, and we are looking forward that every project developer as well as the investors, they will have confidence in our country with us, and then we are also looking forward that with the clarity being coming in the form of in the very high transparencies, the benefit sharing and the principle that we bestow on this market. We are looking forward that we'll having more projects coming up in our country with the very system, with the proper registry systems, with an institutionalized, and then all the governance system well set up, and then we are looking forward that it will be going well in the upcoming years. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Some of the very interesting observations before I hand over to Nadine for the next panel. So what we have seen is that almost all of you has mentioned about trust, integrity, and in the next 5 years or 3 years, there will be good amount of governance, and the institutional has to be done, has to be made in place, so that we can have a global carbon market which is getting established. So with that as a kind of a concluding for this session, I would now give it to Nadine for introducing the next session, which is the linking PACAM with the global carbon market demand. So before I let them go, a huge round of applause to all the fellow panelists. They can all the way stay with us. Thank you. Over to you, colleagues.
Also from my side, a huge thanks. I think I did not overpromise when I said that we have excellent panelists. That was really rich and enriching, the insights that you provided, and you really made it very tangible and embodied how early dialogue, such as today, is an enabler for building that confidence, trust, and predictability, which is the prerequisite for impactful carbon markets. Before handing back to our experienced moderator Uma for the second panel on linking the PACAM with the global carbon market demand, I would encourage you to share your questions through that QR code, because at the end of the second panel, which is also the last panel, we will have a Q&A. And if there are questions that we cannot cover today, we will keep them in our database for the eFAQ that you find on our website. So the questions will get also answered and uploaded there, so you will get your answer with a bit of delay, but we hope to take as many questions today as possible. In the second panel, we will have important perspectives on demand signals for high integrity mitigation outcomes, opportunities for project development across sectors, financing solutions for early stage projects, and the role of multilateral development banks. So with that, Uma, I hand over to you for introducing the panelists. Looking forward to a rich discussion.
Thank you, Nadine, once again for the opportunity. And I think VK is also online. Yeah, he's online. Yeah, okay. So my first panelist for this session, which is linking PACM with the global demand, I would request Marshall from GGGI, and over to you, Marshall. And then we have a colleague from EcoEye, Ms. Jina Choi from EcoEye, and then we have Mr. Virendra Kumar Dugal from ADB, who is joining us virtually. Unfortunately, he could not join us, and thanks for VK, who is joining online and taking time. So we had from Nadine on the context in terms of how PACM is going to be the linking with the global carbon market demand. Thanks, VK, we can see you. Can you hear us? Yep. Yes. Okay, so not taking much of pleasantries, then I would now go into Marshall from GGGI. My question to you is that we heard from the previous panel that in terms of high integrity, trust, market demand. So how do you see from the GGGI side towards the carbon trust front, which you guys have, specifically towards the clear demands of high integrity market outcomes, and what are the things which are missing specifically to translate the actions which are there on the ground towards actual transactions?
Sure. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Marshall Brown. I'm head of Article 6 readiness, basically, at GGGI's Carbon Finance Department. Thanks for having us. Maybe a little bit about the perspective that I'm coming from. GGGI is an intergovernmental organization. We are a member-based, treaty-based organization that supports our member and partner countries with technical assistance and capacity building in a lot of different areas that can promote investment and implementation for tangible results in the area of green growth. So what we are trying to accomplish by supporting readiness in Article 6 is to find a way to implement your green growth objectives, right? So that is obviously very aligned with your climate finance plans, but also your overall development objectives. So with that kind of background, when we talk about the demand signals, I think there was a really good overview of what the demand signals look like in the market right now. I think some other important demand signals to note is that the sovereign buyers, particularly some of the early movers under Article 6.2, have also invested quite a lot of their resources in readiness. So what that tells you is that the players like Sweden and Norway, for example, who contribute to the Carbon Transaction Facility, or New Zealand and the UK even, which are not buyers, but are providing ODA for opening markets, this is a clear signal from the global community that they're interested in partnership, that they understand the constraints that seller or host country governments face, and they're willing to support in the name of cooperation. I think another important demand signal that we're seeing is the interest in transformational or scaled approaches, and also the interest to align with the 6.4 Sustainable Development Tool, like we heard from Sweden. That recent study and survey we did found that that is being seen in the market as a clear baseline for all Article 6 transactions. So there's some additional richness to the demand signals currently. Where we see constraints, I think particularly are in the area, and I think a really important one is in the area of upfront finance. So it's fine to have pipelines of projects, it's fine to have offtake agreements, but most of the time, buyers are not actually investing in the projects. That's really important. They're just buying the credits, but they don't necessarily have a full bank full of resources there to lend for that project to be implemented. So what the discussion that we are trying to facilitate now is how do we get finance in so that these projects can actually be implemented. And what that means is making sure that there is a lot of engagement with domestic commercial finance institutions, and even with the larger institutional investors globally to make sure they understand what the market is and that the risk profile of an Article 6 project, whether that's 6.4 or 6.2, can be mitigated a little bit. I think it's also important to recognize the structural capacity constraints of some of the host country institutions. That was sort of brought up, but in reality, a corresponding adjustment, whether it is for a 6.4 transaction or for a bilateral 6.2 transaction, requires the same amount of institutional capacity and investment, right? So that's still a strategic decision that needs to be made. There's still institutional mandates and processes that need to be developed, and then there need to be people in place to actually do the corresponding adjustment. And that's a really serious structural constraint that not a lot of, that we hear a lot from our partners, but that isn't coming out, I think, as loudly as it should. There sometimes are simply not enough people in a ministry to make their carbon units work. So that still needs to be addressed. And I think another constraint that we could probably work on is having the buyer countries to be a little bit more specific or do a little bit more communication or outreach in terms of what they're willing to buy. So most of them are noting that they want to be aligned with a established standard, that PACM will be good enough, maybe gold standard, maybe Verra, but what specific methodologies, what specific technology types. I think pricing could be important, but at this stage of the market, we're just trying to get transactions done, right? So we could do a better job of communicating with the project developers and with the host countries on that side. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. Like, very interesting in terms of the standardization from the buy side, in terms of how they can communicate in terms of their buying procurement process. And then the money is not actually spent on the project, it's only towards the OTC kind of transactions. So that gives a perfect point towards bringing in our colleague from the private sector, who is a project developer. In terms of you developing the project, so how do you address these questions? And then in terms of developing bankable projects under the PACM, over to you.
Thank you, Uma.
Yeah.
And first of all, thank you NFCCC and Korean government for the kind invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here in the meaningful session. I think Marshall have commented all the details that I wanted to say, but as a project developer, I am from ECOI. I'm the head of climate investment development team, and we are actually the one who first transitioned our CDM project under the PACM, and we're expecting our very first Article 6.4 ERs next month. Thank you. And getting back to your questions, as a project developer, I think the most immediate opportunities are not just defined by sectors, because beyond the sector itself, I think we really look at what can actually move today, which means that we focus on the methodologies that is already approved and also actively being discussed under the PACM. For example, the landfill methodology was approved last year, and also there was a recent discussion at MEP meeting, which actually concluded last week, that I see that there was active work on cook stoves and also N2O abatement. So for us, these are strong signals. So not of what is technically possible, but of what is actually actually can be implementable. So that is very important for us. And also, not having only the methodology in place is enough. Actually, there's other conditions to consider, like demand visibility, because project without the clear demand, it cannot move forward. It's not bankable. So, and these demands, especially from compliance-driven market like KTS, and also Singapore carbon tax or a framework like CORSIA. And also, as Bjorn from IDA and Marshall have mentioned too, the important thing is the policy clarity too. So PACM has fundamentally like changed the landscape. It is no longer just about generating credits, but whether they can be authorized and transferred and used internationally, which means that the host country authorization and corresponding adjustment are now central to project viability. And not to mention the quality and credibility. So nowadays, buyers are placing much more emphasis on robust methodologies and transparent MRV and also overall integrity. So because quality directly impacts demand and pricing, and also to attract investments, project needs to be scalable. So eventually we prioritize opportunities based on whether they can actually be implemented and supported by real demand. And those are the, I think those are the projects that can be moved forward and become bankable.
Thank you. Once again, like in terms of the points which you have mentioned specific to the PACM methodologies and then having the long-term visibility, demand and the clear visibility of how the buyers are looking into and linking it with the other carbon pricing instruments with Singapore or other organizations. So now we will now move towards our colleague from ADB to share his perspectives in terms of how ADB is looking into the barriers and when they are taking part in the early stage investments because as we know, ADB is having multiple carbon funds and how the projects are conceived in this. Over to you, VK. VK, you are on mute, I think. I think still you are on mute. We can't hear you. Yeah, I think so.
Is it okay now?
Yes, it's okay. Over to you.
Sorry. Hi. Thanks, Uma, and very good afternoon, colleagues. Very happy to be part of this panel. My due apologies, I could not travel, even though I so much wanted to and be among you. One thing before I directly jump onto your question, Uma, I think I have a story to tell because I've been listening to the presenter even in the previous session, and one thing which is coming quite often is the barriers and the challenges and the problems and the constraints and the limitations. I think the stage at which we are right now is quite advanced if we compare ourselves where we were 3 years back on this Article 6 implementation. So I think this is very important. And those colleagues who were in the carbon markets at the time when we were in the early days of the implementation of CDM, we know that it takes time. So I think there's no need to panic. We should understand that we are part of the journey, we are progressing, and these are part of the development pathways. I think this is very important for the project developers to know. That's number one. In terms of where we are and what we do, I think one thing which is very important, which stands out, and I think we should not have any hesitation in acknowledging, is that carbon market mechanisms are performance-based mechanisms. That means the carbon assets are generated, issued in the future when project developers are making investment decisions now. That means the carbon finance, which comes as a result of carbon transactions, will come in the future. So there's always an element of uncertainty, which means how many whether or not the project will be registered, whether or not carbon assets will be generated, and how many carbon assets will be generated, and therefore what would the price? What would be the prices at that point in time, and what is going to be the volume of carbon finance I will get, and what impact it will have on the viability, the financial attractiveness, and therefore what kind of incentives would it provide? So I think that's something that we need to acknowledge. Okay, where we are right now, given that these are problems which will probably continue to remain, Where we are currently, I think, as colleagues did mention in the previous session as well, currently what we are facing is a situation where there's no price signal even in the current market. So there is no liquidity in the market. There are not many carbon transactions happening. There's no transparency. And therefore, this is affecting the trust of project developers making investment call in terms of developing projects, which could also be pursued as carbon market projects. I think this is very, very important. Now, what can we contribute? I mean, MDBs do have a role. We were present there. We are quite engaged. We started our work way back in 2005 on carbon markets, but in the Paris Agreement, we set up our Article 6 support facility in 2018 with support from the Swedish Energy Agency, government of Germany, and of course, New Zealand joined as we move forward. So what we are doing is we have been supporting our developing member countries in Asia and the Pacific in enhancing their readiness to operationalize the new carbon market mechanisms under Article 6. So be that on developing national strategies, national frameworks, institutional arrangements, or infrastructure that is needed to get ready for the carbon markets, including helping how they could undertake the authorization corresponding adjustment. This is the new buzzword under the PACM and the Article 6 mechanism. But since we are in the early days of operationalizing, of course, there are a few things which will take time, including development of methodologies. And that's where institutions like us can contribute for the development of methodology. For example, we are working with World Bank colleagues and Rockefeller Institution for early retirement of coal projects, methodology for that. We're also working with colleagues at GIZ and talking about whether we can develop a methodology for the right sector for 6.4. So I think these are some of the things that development institutions like us can contribute. But the biggest contribution that we can make is get a pipeline of projects. Someone did mention that unless someone is investing, how can you develop carbon market projects? So as a development institution, we are putting our own money for the development of, to contribute to the development agenda of our developing member countries, to pursue mitigation actions. And many of those projects could be developed as carbon market projects. So therefore, it is quite possible for us to support some of these projects to be developed as carbon market projects. So that's what we are currently working on. So upstream, midstream, downstream. So we have a role to play, and that's what we are doing through this Article 6 support facility. But as I said earlier, what the missing piece is a price signal, and that's what Uma, as you said, we run a lot of carbon funds. Yes, we do have. We have Japan Fund for a joint crediting mechanism and Climate Action Catalyst Fund. So the GFJCM, funded by government of Japan, is putting money for the incentivizing investments in low carbon technologies and solutions. So JCM, as everybody knows, is a forerunner for Article 6.2. So while we are still, the other development partners or countries are still thinking how to operationalize 6.2, we do have a portfolio of JCM projects, and we know how it can help countries to work together, and how carbon finance can really help countries to deploy advanced low carbon technologies. So we do have an experience on that, and I think that's very useful. And it is very useful for the countries to draw lessons how countries in Asia and the Pacific are actually implementing JCM projects. We also have Climate Action Catalyst Fund funded by the government of Norway and the Swedish Energy Agency. Once again, what we are trying to do is to come early stage, contribute to the development and co-creation of carbon market, high integrity carbon markets. I think that's very important, and that's where we say could be the role for the MDBs. So put together with these two carbon funds, what we are trying to do is to send a price signal, generate interest in the market co-creation for high integrity carbon markets. So what we are looking for Climate Action Catalyst Fund, for example, is high quality projects which are transformative in the nature in the country context, which have the potential to be implemented in compliance with Article 6 mechanism, very specifically PACM. We are quite keen on that. And of course, the projects which have the potential to generate good quality credits and have a high degree of probability to generate carbon credits, because in the end, any effort would fructify only when the transactions are actually implemented. They see the success on the ground. It is not about just the development of the project, but also a generation of the carbon credits and also payment of money, which is carbon finance. So I'll stop here, Uma. Happy to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Specifically on the point I really like is that what is that going to be generated finally out of all the effort which has been done onto the project based on the previous learnings from the CDM days. So now I'll shift towards Marshall again on one of the, I know that Marshall, you have to leave as soon as possible. So my second question to you is that we heard from VK, we heard from the colleague from the private sector, project developer side in terms of the volume, what would be the amount of the credits which we can envisage and the final monetization. So when you, under the CTF developing projects, what are the clear signals or the actions which you consider towards developing the project pipelines, and then the investment decisions which are going to be made into actual practice? Over to you, Marshall.
Thank you. And maybe just to explain a little bit what the carbon transaction facility is. So or what we call the CTF at GGGI. It is kind of has two parts. On one side, there is a multi-donor readiness facility, which I'm the manager for, that aims to provide all of the technical assistance and capacity building that governments might need to set up their systems, and then also to generate early stage or advanced pipeline for the consideration by carbon funds. So that's the other half of the CTF. We have currently two single donor or single buyer carbon funds with the government of Sweden through the Swedish Energy Agency, and also the government of Norway through their Ministry of Climate and Environment. So we are kind of covering the entire spectrum of a transaction, and I think it would leave out part of the story to just focus on the role of demand signals, because Article 6 is about international cooperation at its core, right? So the getting to a transaction is a long process. It requires trust between the two parties. It also, I think something that's really core to our approach is the building of confidence. And the way that you're going to build confidence is through understanding, capacity building, coming up with strategies that are intentionally linked to the overall national development priorities, and also that are rationalized against climate finance versus other forms of finance, just like you would do with foreign direct investment or any other type of finance that you're going to bring into your country. And what we see is that in some cases, host countries are getting to the deal table even with a good project and not feeling confident enough to sign the deal and make the decision, because they aren't quite sure if they thought about that all the way through at the strategy stage, or at the development of their positive list, or other, if they've identified all the proper overselling risk mitigation measures that they should have. So our role as GGGI is to help them walk the country partners through that process, and then stay there to help answer questions and support that cooperation from the host country side. And then from the acquiring party side, from the buyer side also, to facilitate that partnership. There's a lot of kind of magic that happens between the buyer and seller representatives on the sidelines of COP or other events like this, where it's discussions to get a sense of how much does each side of the transaction understand each other? How much do they understand the market? How comfortable are they talking about a transaction? So it is a market at the end of the day, and there are people involved, right? So this building of trust and building of confidence is really, really, really critical. And that's both demand and supply side. So I think I echo what VK is saying, that we've made a lot of progress in the last few years, and there's a really great momentum now. I think where we as an organization are really trying to focus is on this issue of strategies, so that we are not seeing, so that we can kind of remove a barrier to decision making, make it a little bit easier, and make sure that is a really coherent strategy aligned with national development efforts. So I'll leave it there. Thank you,
Marshall. So how many minutes you have, Marshall?
Yeah, my train leaves in 40 minutes, so I will be out of the door at some point soon. Thank you.
Thank you for this. So do we have time? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. With this now, then I'll request our second question to the other panelists. Like we heard from the fund, we heard from the development partner. How do you see in terms of various opportunities which are there in terms of developing mitigation activities towards making it as a very concrete investment decisions towards long-term procurement strategies when you develop the projects? Because I presume you also invest in the projects, and when you raise, you act like you raise the money from outside and then you invest in the projects. So how do you see this opportunity?
I think this is where we see a real shift, because in the past, where we were in the CDM, we just generate the credits and you could just actually sell them. But now it's no longer enough. So from our perspective, these opportunities only translate into investment when they meet very clear conditions, like usability, for example. We ask whether this credits can be used under the CRUCIA or KTS, and also does this align to PECM or actually host countries' carbon framework or buying countries' carbon framework, and all these stuffs we have to consider. So, for example, in practice, not all the credits are like treated equally. For example, KTS, only certain credits such as CDM, CRs, PECM, AERs is allowed, and currently the renewable projects are not allowed in the system. So when we design the project, we have to, with those comments in mind from the beginning. So we have to design projects considering all these frameworks, the eligibility of sort of that, because at the end of the day, if a credit cannot be used, it doesn't really have a value in it. And also, we need to have pricing visibility. That could be benchmark linked to pricing or forward agreement, which allows us to model cash flows, reduce uncertainty, and also secure approvals. And without that, it's very difficult for us to actually implement a project or invest in a project. And also, I think nowadays, we tend to secure demand in an earlier stage. We engage buyer early, we structure the deal early, and we align projects with demand, including demand from the compliance markets. And this significantly reduces the risk. And at the same time, the buyers are also evolving too. They are like forming some kind of like strategic partnership, and they are securing, they're also securing long-term supply, prioritizing high quality projects and credits. And so in many cases, the development and procurement happen in parallel. So in the practice, this is how we actually make investment decisions and how procurement strategies are structured, which we are more like invest based on whether a project can be used, priced, sold, and also trusted by the market.
Thank you. So I just got the note that I have to be brief. So my next question to VK is specifically, you mentioned that you are right now working with multiple funds. So when you look into developing the real actual pipeline of activities, how do you look into the scale, investment scale, particularly considering on the PACM related aspect? Maybe a short intervention from you, VK.
Okay. First of all, I think what's very important is that one of the things that I did mention in my previous intervention is there's no price signal, no trust. I think one thing very important to say, for example, the Climate Action Catalyst Fund. What we are doing under this carbon fund, with the active support from the financing partners, both the government of Norway and the Swedish Energy Agency, is that we are entering into long-term forward contracts, and those contracts will be fixed price contracts. So when you enter into long-term forward contracts with a fixed price, that means you're trying to put a price and you are trying to provide an assurance to the project developers that if they are able to develop the project and generate carbon assets and deliver to ADB's carbon fund, they will get a certain amount of money, and that money they can put in their financial modeling while they are making a capex call. I think this is very important, and this is one of the missing pieces in the market is the price signal or certainty that many of the previous speakers have also talked about. When we are looking at the projects, early stage, especially the PACM projects, we are looking at projects which can certainly be developed as, first of all, those projects have the possibility to be developed in terms of the country context, in terms of the technology. But what is really interesting is for us to see whether there is an existing methodology, meaning that will reduce the development cycle, or the kind of resources would it require for the development of a new methodology. I think that's very important element. It also depends on the kind of technology that you are picking up, because different technologies of the underlying project have a different gestation period in terms of when the project will actually be generated. The developed and the carbon assets will be generated. I think that will also affect. But what we are trying to do is to pick up a few early stage projects which ADB is funding. Those projects are getting to be implemented in compliance with ADB's policies. That means the underlying quality of the project is going to be very good. We are putting technical expertise, knowing that countries at early stage. We are helping countries to get their readiness together, institutional or capacity, so that the governments have the ability to not only to look the ability of the project to be exporting credits, but also develop the systems, including for, say, for example, the corresponding adjustment authorization, and in some cases helping countries to look at the possibility whether how those projects are going to be contributing to their long-term strategies. I think this is very, very important. And eventually, providing financial certainty in terms of the carbon finance those projects is another way through which we are supporting those projects. I'll stop there.
Thank you, VK. With this, I'll conclude the panel because I see Nadine has already come. So,
yeah, when I come, that's when Uma's blood pressure goes up.
Thank you. So, I'll not take much of time. I would request all the colleagues here to give a warm round of applause to our colleagues, both online as well as in person. With that, I'll now hand over to Nadine to
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, VK, for joining. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, indeed, truly distinguished panelists, for these very important perspectives on how the growing demand for high integrity outcomes requires aligned signals, credible pipelines, and targeted financial support to be translated into investment. I will now ask my dear colleague So-Young, she's already standing ready there, to just share the 2 top questions that got the most likes. We would love to take more, but time is running out as we got started, unfortunately, 15 minutes late. But we have your questions on the Mentimeter. So as I said, we will put them on our eFAQ so that you will, with a bit of delay, still get the answers to your much treasured, important questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We've received almost 20 questions from participants. Thank you very much for your active engagement. The most voted question is related to the national arrangement to participate in Article 6. So many participants were wondering that how have our panelists' government integrated Article 6 into national legal framework or national regulations? I think this question is directed to Chile and Somalia. And from the private sector perspective, let me see. I have one question direct to AITA, and this is related to environment integrity. So how AITA has considered risks on environment integrity related to independent standards in the past and foreseen such in the future, how to address it. And very briefly, we have a question for Sweden to how they can engage with you. So thank you very much.
Okay, so me first. I was searching Somalia, but I don't see here. Okay. At least in Chile experience, we had our climate change law that give us the mandate to regulate Article 6. We use the examples and the experience of countries from our same continent, like Colombia, Peru. They were developing also the frameworks, and sharing experience with them help us to define what we would like to see as national framework, and also the experience on negotiations and the rulebook, because the rulebook were still open at that time. And one thing that I always highlight is one of the most, I would say, helpful issues was the experience already with the agreements with other countries, because you know about the questions the private sector has, the certainty they need for investment or for project developers, and you can regulate that in advance, taking into account the experience you are having on developing carbon markets nationally. So you don't need to change the regulation many times or realize that you didn't notice some steps. And also try to be clear for them, but at the same time broader, to don't be so strict. In any case, we know carbon markets, it change and new things appear, and Article 6 will open in 2028. So try to be clear, give some general frameworks, but also be open for the next possible changes.
Thank you very much. So on the second question, I think I can talk 1 hour about this, but whoever asked, feel free to come up after the session. So how to consider environmental integrity in independent crediting programs. I think I already referred to some of the basic principles, right? Additionality, leakage, permanence. In nature-based projects, of course, a lot of it also refers to how you integrate projects or jurisdictional projects into national baselines and forest reference levels. I think it's important to highlight that carbon markets is partly a science, but it's also partly a policy or investment decision. So whilst environmental science is advancing in terms of how we quantify carbon sinks, for example, using digital MRV or satellites or LiDAR to quantify the carbon stocks, in the end, a lot of the decisions that make the credit is about policy decisions. So in PACM and the 6.4 supervisory body, they will make decisions about the baselines, downward adjustments around what criteria is being applied for understanding leakage and so on. And that's why different crediting programs will have slightly different policy level decisions, but on the science level, most of them hopefully should be aligned, and that's where also the ICVCM and the CCPs come in to create a common framework for voluntary carbon markets. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, nice getting that question, of course. If you would like to get engaged with Sweden, the easiest way, I think, would be to get in contact with my colleagues on the buyer side, as I'm the DNA side, so I don't work with with buying ITMOs. I think the easiest way is to get in contact with the unit of International Climate Cooperation. And we have the email address. I don't know if I could. It's sicc@swedishenergyagency.se. So give my colleagues an email and we'll see how we can work it out together, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This really is a matchmaking platform as well. Yeah, with this, we are coming to the end of this multi-dimensional strategic dialogue, and I want to thank you for your many questions. It shows your engagement, and as I said, we have promised to get back to you on each of them. I would now hand over to Perumal for a brief synthesis, putting us on a launch pad for turning the opportunities discussed today into real impact. Before we have the privilege of having the SBI chair with us today for closing remarks. Perumal, over to you for the synthesis.
Thanks. I'll wait for Julia to come over. Slow. It's okay. Yeah, I think it's a great pleasure, and it's always good to listen. And sometimes, to hear from all of you from different perspectives. Julia, please, you could come here. Thanks, Julia. So I think where do we stand and where do we go? But I took some kind of, some of you who know, I'm quite good with, try to be with acronyms with working with UNFCCC, right? So I would not say any acronyms, but I got something like some of the things that optimism and the cautiousness that is going hand in hand. There's a lot of optimism going around, but that there is also equally that I heard that people are cautious in what to engage, where to engage, to whom to engage. It's very clear that's coming over. It's also from the conversations, it is clear that there are teething problems to scale in the carbon market, but once the teething problems are gone past, I think this came from Chile as an example. It took a couple of years initially, but once the teething problem is done, then the scaling in the carbon market happens, which also I think been also said from the multilateral development bank's perspective. I think VK was also talking about, we have seen experiences where it do take time and patience is needed before things can take forward. And then I think it's clear, I think in terms of the clear national framework, necessity for clearer national framework is something that has been said. And I think from private sector as well, both from Beyond as well as Gina, they talked about the availability and the integrity and the confidence and the new actors in the ecosystem that are coming in, providing that necessary assurance for things to go forward. And then the structural capacity, I think in terms of challenge, I think many has indicated the structural capacity problem that is there. And then we also listened in terms of, since carbon markets are primarily a results-based financing tool, the upfront finance and upfront investment is a challenge. And the solution that we heard from some of the rooms is that if you have a long-term contracts, forward-looking contracts, off-take contracts at a fixed price, there is always a possibility to get upfront finance. This is what we also heard from the floor. So which is also, I think, a good takeaway to take in terms of, I would say, having an off-take contract. I think this is also said by Gina, I think, in terms of having an off-take agreement because they only now are engaging, because in the CDM markets, we had more supply, and then after the supply is there, we used to go and find the buyers. And now it's very clear that currently the market where we are functioning, we heard VK talking about the forward contracts, long-term contracts, long-term offtake with fixed price. Whereas I think Gina was also talking about having a strong signal upfront in order for them as a private sector to act. And everyone has said that there is no compromise when it comes to carbon markets in terms of quality of the units that needs to be there if the market has to scale. So quality, credibility, and the reputation is something that has been said. And then the political and the regulatory stability, I think that came from beyond in terms of having the assessment of quality or is not just limited to the GHG impacts that are created from the carbon markets, but the wider ecosystem to see whether or not this country has the political stability, does it have a regulatory stability, how does what is being promised can be delivered from a long period of time. People use different technical terms like authorization, etc. But if I have to put together, I think that's something it's there. And then the final thing I would say is like, I think there was also a question in terms to reflect on one of the questions that came. Of course, I didn't take your email ID, so I have to take it to contact Sweden. But I think one of the things from me, like the question that Bjorn responded, I think when it comes to credibility and integrity, what I see as a problem is the what requirement is there for everyone. You take a CORSIA standard, you take a ICVCM CCP standard or a PACM standard or anything that you take, there's absolutely no difference in terms of what is the criteria that you need to have in order to say that your units are of high quality, right? It says it has to be permanent, it has to be MRV'd, it should be below business as usual. Right? Because even CORSIA has to change that, otherwise they will not be meeting the 6.2 requirement. So it's very clear that what needs to be done, everybody, like if you look at any quality criteria, it remains the same. But where the problem lies is the how, right? So every standard has its ways to demonstrate on the how. And that is where we have the problem, right? And whose how is the best how, I do not know. Of course, you know what I will say, but I will not say, since this is an open market dialogue platform, I will not say that. But I think what you have to take away from here is that by saying that, yes, there are multiple standard organizations trying to do that, it's very welcome and it has to be welcomed because this is bringing some kind of a coherence in the market rather than everybody claiming themselves to be the ones with highest quality. But still the problem that I see is that the what, everybody is clear, but the how has a problem. And I think we have to fix the problem of the how. With my final sense, I would say PACM might be giving you the way of how to fix that how and give it back to, and I will take this opportunity to thank all of you. And before we conclude the session, I will give it to the chair of the SBI, Julia. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Parimal. And good afternoon, colleagues. It's a real pleasure to be here in Yeosu for the last 2 days of Climate Week. I just arrived last night because I was at the Petersburg Dialogue in Berlin earlier in the week. So I'm really pleased to have made it here. And it's a particular pleasure to be here at this important dialogue on facilitating buyer and seller engagement and strengthening high integrity cooperation under Article 6. I'm not an Article 6 expert, but I always find it very fascinating to sit in on these discussions and dialogues and to learn a little bit more. This discussion, from what I heard of it today, really show how the international community has taken the landmark decision on carbon markets from Baku just 18 months ago and turned it into action. It's no longer a question of whether we have the right framework, but rather a question of how we can translate the Article 6 framework into finance projects and real mitigation outcomes on the ground. And it's very fascinating to hear a bit about how that's happening. The Article 6.4 mechanism is a critical tool for enhancing ambition and enabling the achievement of the goals of the Paris Agreement. PACM represents the next generation of UNFCCC market mechanisms, as you all well know, designed to deliver high-integrity, Paris-aligned mitigation outcomes that directly contribute to NDC implementation. And its success depends on cooperation, trust, and integrity. I've heard today your reflections on some of the significant barriers that must be overcome at the national and project levels to continue to advance implementation of the mechanism. And I encourage you, both as representatives of the public and private sectors, to work together to overcome these barriers. It's only through this cooperation that we can maximise the opportunities created by the establishment of the PACM to achieve real mitigation outcomes. And as we've heard so clearly here today, to be effective, cooperation must be built on that trust and integrity, and those values are core to the success of Article 6. It's critical that the participants in the PACM maintain the high integrity benchmark parties set in the Article 6 rulebook. Paris markets should be seen beyond just supply and demand and seen as the way that PACM translates into tangible investments and scalable mitigation outcomes on the ground. I hope today's dialogue has contributed to fostering cooperation, trust and integrity by bringing together the full range of Article 6 stakeholders, potential buyer countries, host countries, development partners, financial institutions and project developers. In this context, the UNFCCC Secretariat and its regional collaboration centres remain fully committed to supporting countries in delivering Article 6.4 implementation on the ground, as you've heard continuously, through strengthened capacity, practical tools and facilitation of cooperation. I'd just like to close with a quick reflection on how this discussion aligns with implementation efforts across the Paris Agreement. As we've heard from the incoming presidencies, COP31 will be an implementation COP. In their respective roles as COP31 President and President of Negotiations, Turkey and Australia are taking an implementation-focused centred approach centred around the principles of dialogue, consensus and action. I'm sure you've heard those words repeated already by the incoming presidencies. Each of these principles can be applied to the 6.4 mechanism. Dialogue between countries and sectors is critical for overcoming obstacles and unlocking both supply and demand. Consensus is core to ensuring all parties and actors understand and uphold high standards of integrity in implementing and scaling the mechanism, and action is of course central to implementation and delivering real mitigation outcomes. I look forward to continuing to learn more about how the 6.4 mechanism can be an example of how UNFCCC decisions are translating into tangible and meaningful outcomes. And thank you all for your active engagement today and for welcoming me at the end of the dialogue. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It was such a privilege for us to have you here and to bring us back to the bigger picture and to the current time that we are in and the context that we have ahead. So you really connected the discussions of today with the actions of tomorrow. And we warmly thank you for this. It was a great pleasure having you. And thank you for your patience as we started late. The whole event was a bit delayed, so we really treasure your time. I also want to give a heartfelt thanks to our truly excellent panelists and also to you as excellent participants, because in the end you are the ones who make all what was said today actually matter on the ground. And last but certainly not least, to the Republic of Korea, because without your generous hosting, we wouldn't have had this fantastic opportunity to have such a enriching, multidimensional dialogue and contributing to driving forward impactful collaboration, aligning on the supply and demand perspective, and moving for unlocking investment. I have now a very, very, very important point left. As I said, this is all about you. So please give us your feedback. I promise it's very quick. But this helps us to make sure that what we do is actually targeted to your needs and interests. So we much treasure that feedback and we actually use that, because when we report back to the SBM, we always give an evaluation that is fact-based, evidence-based, and the basis for this is this feedback survey. So you really help us to make sure that we remain relevant for you. We remain at your disposal, and we look forward to continuing this journey together. Thank you so much.
I saw bags in the